21 Piløts is a group that has long evaded any sort of genre classification. It did, however, get clubbed under broad categories of emo and pop-punk music, in terms of their most loyal audiences being people who experience great psychological distress. The emo label seems to make a lot of sense. What is interesting, though, is how many of their overtly Christian songs are able to resonate with such a wide and often anti-establishment audience. Christianity is a religion with a history of colonialism. In any former colony, the oppression carried out through Christian missionaries is fresh in the post-colonial memory, and the syllabi in literature studies are still highly dominated by works of the Christian world and their perspectives, which is often infuriating. So what is it about 21 Piløts that seems to work? It is not the only exception. Works like Paradise Lost and Dr. Faustus, even though directly Christian in both themes and actual characters, are two of the most loved texts, even here, because of the sentiments they are able to convey. Let's take a look at some factors playing into this with reference to some songs by 21 Piløts. There are certain aspects of religion that are moral dilemmas which may be seen as universally human, since morality is often defined across cultures through the popular religion, irrespective of whether you belong to that religion or not. Religious iconography can also serve the purpose of expressing a sentiment rather than something necessarily literal. For example, the image of Sisyphus as used in absurdist literature. Sometimes there are overt references to it, sometimes there are structural ones, like through Godot. In all senses, the icon itself is simply a vehicle to induce the idea of circularity, of monotony, and a feeling of being trapped. One might look at car radio for an example. It is inspired by an actual incident, so the radio is literal. However, that does not discount it working as a symbol. Let's look at what is the essential difference between a metaphor and a symbol. A metaphor is absent from the narrative. It is brought in from outside to explain something within, or even to show a lack of something within the narrative. A symbol, on the other hand, is present within the narrative in the literal sense, while still being representative of a larger theme in the narrative as a whole. Besides this, some plot devices are literal without even being symbolic, but they serve a purpose to show someone's mindset or to induce certain emotions, like the blue paint in High Rise, that serves to show how little a thread someone's sanity might be hanging by. So a similar purpose is served by the car radio in the song. It is not hard to understand then how symbols of religions may be used to connote something beyond the literal rather than being stuck in either the literal or the figurative. I begin by taking a look at the song Blasphemy from No Pun Intended. The title itself has religious implications, and the song grapples with sin and forgiveness. While Christianity informs a particularly black and white morality, which can often be off-putting, this aspect is exactly what is brought into question through the despairing tone of someone who thinks they have failed their faith, while the meta-narrative provides a dramatic irony where the audiences know that it is the faith that has failed them. The song ends with the lines, "Let the water wash away everything that you've become. On your knees, today is gone, and tomorrow is sure to come." The imagery here is that of a baptism, which in itself is a symbolic gesture. Another universal tendency is the very human need and search for forgiveness and absolution, which a religion like Christianity provides easily. The words here hence can be read as a benediction or a prayer at the end of the day, as if a consolation spoken to one's own self. The water imagery is recurring, notably in Addict with a Pen, where Tyler searches for a drop of water that is not afforded to him, a forgiveness which is not earned or deserved, and he asks to be washed with God's water, which is to be given respite anyway. In the song Drown, this is taken further to "Can you wash me, can you drown me?" To be made into a hyperbole. The water there also is present alongside images of blood. He says, "I still ignore the dark red bloodstains on the floor, and I'm back in front of you, Lord, with the blood on the floor." This image overtakes then as a universal sign of guilt and admittance of wrongdoing that leaves a stain behind on one's soul, that is, one's conscience, which is always nagging. The implication of God's blood will be explored in further sections. But let's move on to a more specific icon, that of denial. Denial is a motive that is expressed through allusions to and icons taken from the Bible. Take the following lines from Ode to Sleep. "I'm not free, I asked forgiveness 3 times, same amount that I denied. I 3 times repeat this crime. I'm afraid to tell you who I adore. Won't tell you who I'm singing towards. Metaphorically, I'm a whore, and that's denial number 4. The number 3 is also important to Christian numerology as the number of harmony, the Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the 3 wise men, etc. This is particularly a reference to the denial of Peter the Apostle. During the Last Supper, Jesus told him, "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." Peter denies knowing Jesus 3 times after his arrest and cries in despair afterwards. Tyler is similarly hiding the fact that these songs are written towards God, and I will discuss this further later on, by hiding them under vague imagery, and that has him feeling a great amount of guilt. Just as the icon of Sisyphus is used to denote circularity, denials here similarly as icons are meant to induce the feeling of hiding something that is very glaring, rejecting the elephant in the room, and feeling remorse only to fall back into the same patterns of repression and denial. Whether that denial is about God or not, the feeling itself is universal enough to be able to relate to. This numerology and the denial itself can be seen again in polarized, stylistically expressed as "all I feel is deny, deny, denial." So it is spoken thrice. And the denial in this song is also easily interpreted as the psychological maladaptive behavior, which the intended audiences will be highly familiar with. In The Judge, he says 3 lights are lit but the 4th one's out, and in Taxi Cab refers to 3 men in the car with him. So the continuity of the Trinity is there to provide structure, but out of the way enough that it can serve more as an Easter egg or as a covert allusion to give a more layered understanding without necessarily imposing itself onto the interpretation. The Trinity does lead us to a trickier icon to understand, which is God the Father himself. Going back to Blasphemy, the baptism imagery is not the only religious thing in the song. Consider these lines. "I want to be afraid, but it seems that these days I'm caught under water and I'm falling farther. My heart's getting harder, I'm calling my father. Am I screaming to an empty sky?" Father here clearly implies God, and is on the nose enough that it cannot be ignored. The empty sky that is immediately following, though refuted in the lines after these, still throws doubt upon the whole premise. Grappling with an authority, divine or otherwise, that is glaringly absent when it should be the one that is helping out is another experience that is quite universal. Not to mention that God the Father also forms the basis of the patriarchal family system, which most people are subject to, that informs culture, society, and institutions of the state, which I will discuss further. Blasphemy does also throw light on the friction of coming to terms with the love and wrath of God, so to speak, as how love seems absent but the authority is back again when it is time to show disapproval. The perfect song to illustrate how this icon works is Implicit Demand for Proof. It is an explicitly religious song that deals with sin, blasphemy, and religious doubt. The song clearly addresses a God who is absent, who can strike him down at any moment. It is a song easily in my favorites, despite not a word of respite from the address to the divine. This is because it again uses iconography that can be applied to any authority figure, which is how I always read it. The Father is a patriarch who cannot be questioned, must be respected, and does not owe anyone anything. Such is also the case with familial structures, the structure of education, and that of the state itself. In fact, Louis Althusser, the Marxist philosopher, argues that education replaced the church or religion at large as the dominant ideological state apparatus. In simple words, the oppression of a capitalist authoritarian state used to be ideologically carried out through religion to put the ideas of blind faith in the minds of the masses. But in the modern world, the authority is ingrained in people through educational institutions where authorities have full control and must be respected no matter what. Doubts around a God that shows only wrath and no love, and the following guilt and expectation of punishment, can hence be adapted into a genuine but frightful questioning of any other form of authority at all. In this sense, it becomes a particularly rebellious and subversive song, applied in any interpretation. The father-son icon can be seen in Addict with a Pen most prominently, where he confesses not having been a good son, and similarly in Polarize. There are some other ways in which images can be used as exaggerations or for aesthetic reasons, like the lines in The Judge, "I know my soul's freezing, hell's hot for good reason," where the juxtaposition just makes the imagery more stark, and despite the references to hell and the devil, the theme of Judgment Day expresses universal sentiments of internalized judgment seeking external absolution. This will be talked about further in the next section. Let us turn our attention for a moment to Kitchen Sink. The song with the line, "A kitchen sink to you is not a kitchen sink to me," makes clear the purpose of these songs as something to make a personal interpretation of, through unstructured stimuli that does not have to particularly make sense to everyone in the same way. In psychological evaluations, the Rorschach ink blot test and the thematic apperception test, among others, are called projective tests for personality. Unlike objective batteries, these rely on providing stimuli unstructured enough that anyone can project onto them their own interpretations. Some of those are more common, like this ink blot being seen as a butterfly. More specific interpretations relate to what the individual is able to project onto the image based on their personal life and internal conflicts. The songs by 21 Pilots are similarly vague and cryptic enough that, irrespective of their intended or original meaning, they can and are supposed to provide any number of interpretations to the audience. For instance, the song "Tear in My Heart" is a love song and is widely recognized as such. However, when I personally listen to it, the "she" in my mind is self-harm. This does not take away from the original interpretation or make a sweet song into a sad one, but rather gives me an opportunity to use the song to find understanding and solace for my own self. As they say in Guns for Hands, simply shoot at this confused music. Applying it to a more religious theme, let's look at "Fall Away." Here again, he waits upon judgment, and even as he grapples with the guilt, his doubts are ever present. The frustrations of it clear in "I don't want your way, I want mine." A more interesting verse is one intertextually referencing "drown." It goes, "Every time I feel selfish, ambition is taking my vision, my crime is my sentence, repentance is taking commission, it's taking a toll on my soul, I'm screaming submission, and I don't know if I'm dying or living, cause I will save face for name's sake, abuse place, take aim to obtain a new name and a new place. But my name is lame, I can walk and I am the same, and my name became a new destiny to the grave." The sentiments are, again, quite universal and the words vague. It is common to make a mistake and be the one to most harshly judge oneself, denoted here through the submission. An anxiety-ridden mind will do just that, and any small lapse in judgment will also be seen as a willful attempt to hurt someone. There's also the matter of perceiving oneself as being self-centered and the guilt that is attached to prioritizing oneself in selfish ambition, which is typically a trauma response. The verse is then simply about trying to have punishment, absolution, and a new start all at once, and a jumble of that confusion, something that more specific circumstances can be projected onto. With a slightly more specific reference, like "Polarize," the lines go, "I wanted to be a better brother, better son." Brotherhood in a Christian sense is about being a kind member of the community. This is a value preached by all religions and even non-religious moral teachings of being decent and ethical. The fear of not being a good person goes beyond just the Christian idea of what a good person is. Take it a step further in specificity and looking at the following lines from Migraine. "Thank God it's Friday, because Fridays will always be better than Sundays, because Sundays are my suicide days." Sunday has a specific significance in the Christian world. It is the day of rest, it is the day everyone goes to church, and here clearly the spiral starts off because of a disconnect from one's faith and internal morality. This is also seen in Polarize, Domingo in Fuego, or Sunday on Fire. However, it is unstructured enough that until I particularly thought on it, that is not where my mind went, and I could project my own meaning to it. So a non-Christian relating to the sentiment about Sundays, curious. So we will take a bit of a tangent here. The modern world, economically and socially, is based upon the ideas of Christianity. Sunday is the day off because, according to Christian thought, it must be the day of rest. Max Weber famously even pointed out that the spirit of capitalism itself bases itself on the work ethics and ideas of hard work as preached by Protestantism. Weber also showed how the religions of different regions like Confucianism and Taoism in China and Hinduism and Buddhism in India also affected the economics of those regions. With the emergence of a global economy, this culture and economic system becomes homogenized and based around Western Christian ideas. So Sunday, the day of rest and church going, now also has the economic connotation of the globally recognized day off. It is a day with a lot of the usual distractions missing. To a person who is undergoing chronic mental turmoil, the kind of audiences that 21 Pilots usually address their songs to, Saturday is an indication of making it through another week, a checkpoint for someone for whom everyday activities are burdensome. Sunday is a reminder of that cycle starting all over again. These days can often be a lot more stressful and depressing and filled with a deep-seated hopelessness. The song most blatantly dealing with religious doubt from Blurryface, is unstructured in how these doubts and abandonment issues are expressed so that it could apply to any well-wisher in whom one is losing faith because of their own insecurities, starting with scared of my own image, scared of my own immaturity, and confessing, even when I doubt you, I am no good without you. Isolation as a defense mechanism is quite common, and the song, though religious, is able to capture what that isolation really feels like. There are some other elements like these that are something specifically religious that also coincide with something more general. Consider the lines in Addict with a Pen when Tyler says, "You specialize in dying." A lot of such lyrics can be attributed to people who may know death closely because of suicidal ideation, but also to death itself, whether personified or as an abstraction, something that is an undeniable truth to everyone. In Isle of Flightless Birds, the slightly moralistic religious lines at the end are, "How frustrating and so degrading his time we're wasting, and time will fly by and the sky will cry as light is fading, and he is waiting oh so patiently." Here too the he can refer to the personification of death itself, waiting on earth and making it known that our time is limited, which is something everyone grapples with eventually. Saying your soul knows good and evil does not have to be understood only by those who believe in a soul either, since soul is often used to denote the things that a person might know in their consciousness as their own personal truths. The vagueness around death is utilized in these lyrics often, like Run and Go's "I have killed a man and all I know is I am on the run and go," where it does not have to be literal for someone to relate by projecting onto it someone they lost ties with or something coming to an end. This is also utilized in A Car, a Torch, a Death and in the song Taxi Cab, where a car in both the songs is used as a symbol of a life which is eventually approaching death. The morning sun, where all you did will be undone. In A Car, a Torch, a Death, there are repeated references to demons and God, which serve the purpose of denoting turmoil and love. In that same vein, when the song says, "I began to understand why God died," it can refer to dying for the love of humanity itself, or to the Nietzschean idea of losing faith. In both cases, it ends up conveying a sentiment rather than any overt religious themes. It is quite like how Hosea in Take Me to Church says, "The only heaven I'll be sent to is when I'm alone with you." It is to be understood as expressing a sentiment through use of divine and or infernal imagery as hyperbole. Something interesting that may be analyzed about 21 Pilots in this context is a different kind of religious nature of the songs, and the main reason they were able to cultivate the kind of following that they did. 21 Pilots' songs became something of a scripture in themselves to those who were involved in the clique. They became words to follow in times when nothing else worked. Take the song Cruise as the perfect example of this. We often told each other, when all other reassurance failed, to just stay alive because Tyler says so. It worked a lot like any other faith in that sense. Tyler had proven that he understood us and what we go through, so we could trust that if he says stay alive because it is worth it, then surely he knows what he's talking about. That besides, it was the simplest request, not something laden with morals or expectations, but rather a realistic and rational goal. Just ride the wave when the darker star strikes. When you can do nothing else, just survive, and it will be enough. And that is something that even my therapist taught me about suicidal ideation. You just have to wait for it to pass and focus on nothing else. Kitchen sink, as mentioned before, also serves a scripture purpose, defining some fundamentals of the teachings, so to speak, of 21 Pilots, to create purpose and to define your own purpose. And I would bring back again Isle of Flightless Birds because it ends up challenging a set of black and white morality and bringing up again this idea of defining your own purpose. If you decide to live by what you think's wrong and what's right, believe me, you'll begin to wish you were sleeping. Your weeping will creep in your head and you'll cry. But if we wake up every morning and decide what we believe, we can take apart our very heart and the light will set you free. This is another interesting subversion, since the light and the grace become not expectations to follow and standards to achieve, but something that is liberating in an intrapersonal sense. That same attack on black and white morality is seen also in Polarized, because such a morality would be very convenient but also very difficult to implement. We would all like an answer of whether we are purely good or purely bad it is a preoccupation very easy to spiral into. However, the more nuanced our understanding of our own selves and morality becomes, the more we realize that everyone falls into a grey area, and polarizing, cutting off neatly only the bad parts of us is not really possible. Take even something that is more explicit in religious allusions, but also preaches its own values: hometown. The song makes direct references to certain Bible verses, like Jeremiah chapter 20 verse 9 with the imagery of fire and bones, and Joshua chapter 24 verse 14 with "Put away all the gods your fathers served today." What is especially interesting to note is how these words play out outside the context of the Bible, where it is said to the pagans, and within the context of the song, where Tyler then goes on to say, "We don't know how to put back the power in our soul." The doubt falls not on pagan practices, as in the original context, but on all inherited beliefs, on all religion, but beyond that, on all institutions that have failed us time and again. These lines are extremely powerful in the subversion that they achieve, how they also bring a sense of community alongside it to the listeners. In parting, I will refer to one more song that has been neglected so far, which is Claire from Regional at Best. This song makes a declaration of the fact that many of these songs are addressed to a greater love, that is God, and that it has been a choice between possible rejection by the audiences for acknowledging this, or being untrue to oneself by not acknowledging or denying God. To try and twist this into an ambiguous meaning would be to actively disrespect and be untrue to the song, so that is not why I bring it up. Rather, I refer to it because it is glaringly irrefutable in its subject and in a plea for it to be taken on surface level. I bring up this song because it would be an act of conscious ignorance and a literary fallacy to outright reject and ignore that the songs are Christian and are truly directed towards God. This is simply the context within which they exist. It is, however, not a context which hinders further interpretation. It gives a background, a basis of mythology, and a nuanced understanding of the sentiments expressed. The sentiments evoked are always central to any kind of poetry. A story may be told just as well through prose, and an idea proposed just as well through a pamphlet. What I argue is that this religious context does not hinder the accessibility of the songs so much as it provides a foundation on which to build. To say that the songs are not necessarily religious, or to say they are too religious to express anything universal, would both be wrong, as is proven in the praxis to which I give theory here, rather than giving a theory which I hope to build a praxis on.